As a fan of shonen manga and anime and their incredibly overpowered main protagonists, I find it extremely entertaining to think of hypothetical versions of said character and flesh out the abilities and how the new version of this said character would interact in the universe. It's just a lot of fun, and there is no better series to do this with than Bleach. Reason being is because Ichigo Kurosaki is an amazing character. He's the amalgamation of all three of the strongest races in Bleach, giving him access to almost every overpowered ability that the series has to offer. And although I love the route that Kubo did ultimately decide for Ichigo, I can't help but to sit back and think, well, what if Ichigo chose this route? Or what if Ichigo leaned more towards his hollow powers? So in this video, we are exploring the hypothetical scenario of Ichigo being taken back to Yhwach's castle and being pretty much reprogrammed or retrained to be a Quincy. Or better yet, a Sternritter. In this What If, we'll be going over just how powerful Sternritter Ichigo would be, what his abilities would be, and how it would affect the Bleach universe as a whole if Ichigo were to make the flip and become a Sternritter and ultimately a loyal follower of Yhwach himself. What Shrift would Ichigo get? And what Quincy powers would he decide to use? Because he'd have access to a plethora of them all. Now, to set the stage for how strong Ichigo would be, I want to take you back to the Soul Society arc, where Ichigo receives his first ever Quincy buff. Ichigo goes from arguably lieutenant level all the way up to captain level. He goes from fighting a tough fight with Renji to being able to fight on par with Kenpachi Zaraki, a captain level character. Without this Quincy buff, Ichigo would have surely been destroyed. We see him unconsciously tap into his Quincy powers, even going as far as using a Quincy technique named Blute, which pretty much, it doesn't heal your injuries, but it stops them from getting any worse, stops any bleeding, and allows you to continue to fight. And like I said, it was the only reason Ichigo even stood a chance fighting Kenpachi Zaraki without his Bankai training that he receives afterwards. Now we flash forward many arcs, and we have an Ichigo that is a seasoned fighter. He fights right alongside with all the Gote. He's captain level, and the Quincy's are invading, and we get to the scene where Yhwach tells Hashwolf that we'll take Ichigo back to the castle and we'll reprogram him. So this is where we start. We start with an Ichigo that has access to Bankai, that's helped the Gote out in many different situations. He's one of their strongest assets, and now he's been turned over to the side of the Quincy's. Now, to make this what if work correctly, we're just going to have to assume that Yhwach already had a plan in reprogramming Ichigo and had a way to do it. So Ichigo's reprogrammed. He is now a loyal Yhwach follower. Something else to keep in mind is Ichigo still has access to his full bring Bankai mode. His sword is not broken by Hashwolf because that scene never happens. Ichigo is taken unconscious to the castle. So now we're at a point in time where Ichigo's waking up, he's reprogrammed, and it's time to start Quincy training. He's either going to train with Hashwolf or Yhwach himself. Now, in terms of the 1,000-year Blood War timeline, we're also going to assume for this what if that Ichigo picks up these Quincy techniques easily. He's a Quincy prodigy, and for this what if, we're going to say he learns everything he needs to learn in a short period of time. So while training with Yhwach or Hashwalth, Ichigo is going to get access to all the basic Quincy techniques and then the advanced Quincy techniques as well. So Reishi manipulation is going to be a huge buff for Ichigo. Being able to use blue at any time is also going to be an incredible buff. And if he ever found the need, Ronso Tengai would end up helping Ichigo in a sticky situation. But the major Quincy abilities that are going to give Ichigo this huge amp that this video is based around is Yhwach needs to give Ichigo a Shrift, and he also needs to learn how to perform Volt Standing. This is going to amp Ichigo to an insane level. And now, guys, this is where this what if gets extremely fun. Ichigo's done being secretly trained, and now it's time to introduce him to the rest of the Sternritter army. Yhwach and Hashwalth come up the stairs, revealing a Sternritter Ichigo. He's clothed in full Sternritter gear, and he is loyal. Probably more loyal than all of them, because he's been reprogrammed to be Yhwach's loyal son. And guys, a lot of the Sternritter are not gonna like the fact that Yhwach's showing such favoritism towards Ichigo. You have to keep in mind, Ichigo's not a purebred Quincy. He's what a pureblood Quincy would consider tarnished goods. But Yhwach does not care about that whatsoever. He's just happy to have such an incredible force now on his side. Because there's actually a very good chance that Yhwach, instead of naming Uryu his successor, he names Ichigo his successor. And the blood drinking ceremony commences. Yes, Ichigo will drink Yhwach's blood, thus receiving a very powerful Shrift. Now, guys, before we go any further, I want to know in the comments below, what do you guys think Sternritter Ichigo's Shrift would be? How strong would it be? What abilities would it have? What would make it unique? Because, guys, I put a lot of thought into these Shrift ideas for Ichigo, and I'm really excited to rack your brains, fellow Bleach fans, and see what you come up with. So don't forget to tell me in the comments below. Now back to the what if. Now, guys, we've seen some pretty powerful Shrifts amongst the Sternritter, whether it be Askin's Death Dealing, Asnot's The Fear, or even Gerard the Miracle. So keep that in mind. Ichigo's Shrift doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it does have to be extremely overpowered, because Ichigo's gonna receive one of the best Shrifts ever created by Your Majesty Yhwach. This hypothetical Ichigo still has the same personality he had before receiving the reprogramming. It's just, instead of his extreme loyalty for his friends and family, that loyalty now is shifted towards Yhwach. And the reason I bring up Ichigo's personality still being intact is because a lot of the Sternritter receive Shrift that are comparable to their personalities. So when pondering an idea for what Ichigo's Shrift would be, I kept that theme. So that being said, here's my first idea for what Ichigo's Shrift could be. I'm calling this first Shrift the Rain. And hear me out, guys. The idea behind this Shrift would be Ichigo goes into battle and it just suddenly begins raining. And his enemy doesn't realize it, but each raindrop is taking a little bit of Ryatsu from Ichigo's opponent. As the raindrop hits, the spiritual pressure lowers of Ichigo's enemy. And naturally, as it starts raining harder, this enemy that Ichigo's facing will lose their Ryatsu or spiritual pressure so quickly that they will not be a match for Ichigo anymore after he unleashes this Shrift. And each droplet doesn't have to take much Ryatsu. But on a battlefield where Ichigo's letting it rain, the opponent will lose their spiritual pressure very quickly. Bleach as a series has always put an emphasis on rain and how it correlates to Ichigo's life. Everything but the rain, that episode is probably one of the most important episodes to Bleach. Now that leads us into our second Shrift idea for Ichigo. This Shrift will be a dimensional Shrift. And what I mean by that is when Ichigo goes to fight an opponent, it'll literally take Ichigo and his opponent into Ichigo's own pocket dimension. And this pocket dimension would be in the form of Ichigo's inside realm, where he talks to Old Man Zangetsu, aka a figment of his Quincy powers, or Yhwach. And the thing about it is when Ichigo and this said opponent are in this realm, Ichigo could control the entire landscape of this realm. Okay? Not only that, but he can summon Old Man Zangetsu to help him fight. So not only will Ichigo's opponent have to worry about himself, he'll have to worry about the landscape, Old Man Zangetsu, and Ichigo, making this dimensional Shrift incredibly powerful. Now, my third and final idea for a Shrift for Ichigo just comes in the form of a massive shield, an impenetrable shield in the form of a Ryatsu Quincy cross or something like that protects Ichigo and anyone else he would want to shield. And since he has extreme loyalty for all his Quincy brothers, he could literally shield all the other Sternritter with this miraculous shield that he now can summon at will. It doesn't even have to come in the form of a shield. It could come in the form of armor that he wraps around his family and friends, aka the Sternritter, and he can actually wrap this armor around himself. It's very simple, kind of like Ichigo's Bankai, but it's an extremely potent ability. When you can't hit your opponent, what else can you do? Now you're going to ask, how is that any different than Blue? Well, it's a lot different because Ichigo can still launch massive Getsugo Tenchos through the shield at his opponent. So the shield can let attacks out, but it's going to let nothing in. There's not going to be a Bankai that can affect Ichigo because it's not going to be able to penetrate his ultimate shield. Now, those are just a few ideas of what Ichigo's Shrift could be. But like I said, I want to know what you guys come up with down in the comments. So don't forget to tell me, and don't forget to like this video as well. So now we get back to our what if story. Ichigo has been introduced to all the Sternritter. And it's pretty apparent that Ichigo is now Yhwach's right-hand man, and Hashwolf doesn't have a problem with it. But a lot of the other Quincy do. Specifically Basby, he raises his voice and he goes, "Master Yhwach, how can you allow this outsider to become your right-hand man?" And before Basby even realizes it, Ichigo flashes through the room using the fastest Hirenkayaku that any Sternritter's ever seen. And he slashes Basby's head off in front of everyone, making an example of him. All the Sternritter are in awe that Ichigo just moved that fast using their Quincy technique for high-speed movement. Not only that, he destroyed one of the strongest Sternritter just like that. The Ichigo that stands before all the Sternritter is a monster. He's mastered every Quincy technique, and he has a powerful Shrift like we mentioned before. And then yet another surprise happens. Yhwach appoints Ichigo to the Schutzstaffel, the honorary high guard of Yhwach, your majesty himself. Any ill feelings in the air are gonna have to wait for later, because now it is time for the second invasion of the Soul Society. All the Sternritter line up at the Gate of the Sun, ready for Yhwach's orders. They are all more than ready to go and conquer for their lord. Now, on the other end, the Soul Society is nowhere near ready for a second invasion. Not only have multiple Bankais been plundered, but the head captain Yamamoto himself is now gone. Many Soul Reapers are on the brink of death after the first battle with the Sternritter. And above all else, Soul Society's savior, Ichigo Kurosaki, the one that always comes in the nick of time to save Soul Society, is nowhere to be found. No one knows what's happened to Ichigo. They just assume he's been completely obliterated in the fight against Yhwach. There's no Zero Division coming to save the Soul Society this time, because they have no reason to come down to the Serete. They too believe Ichigo Kurosaki was wiped out in the first invasion. Newly appointed head captain Kuraku sits in his office frustrated. He has to find a way to defeat the Quincy's, but in the back of his mind is a great sorrow, a sorrow for what they let happen to Ichigo in the first invasion. But there's no time for a heavy heart in war. Kuraku must think of what he can do to defeat the Quincy's. His first move is to train Kenpachi Zaraki in the art of the sword, and also travel to the Mugen to speak with Sosuke Aizen. These two decisions, along with Kisuke Uehara's research to regain their stolen Bankais, are the only hope that the Serete has at this point. The Soul Society knows the Quincy will be coming again. They just don't know when. And then, like clockwork, alarm bells start ringing through the Serete. High spiritual pressure is located in every district. Everyone knows the Quincy have returned. So the remaining captains prepare, and through the shadows, one by one, the Quincy reappear. Above them, Yhwach and Hashwath appear, and every one of the captains are completely in shock. Not because the Sternritter are there, they knew they would come. But standing beside Yhwach and Hashwath is Ichigo Kurosaki. They all thought he had been obliterated in the fight with Yhwach, but it's slowly coming to realization that they were wrong. And the worst has happened. Ichigo is now their enemy. He's now a Sternritter. You can see the hope draining out of most of the Soul Reapers' faces, because they know that they are all about to perish. The Sternritter alone were too much for them to handle in the first invasion. No one's coming to save them with a power-up, and there definitely won't be an Ichigo to come to the rescue. On that day, the court guard is practically obliterated by Yhwach, the Sternritter, and Sternritter Ichigo. They have no hope. Not even Kenpachi is enough. On the brink of death, Captain Kuraku is able to escape into the shadows with a few of his comrades, but that's it. He sits in the shadows completely shocked at what he had just witnessed. Was that Ichigo, he thought to himself? But he knew the answer. It was Ichigo, but not the Ichigo they had known. This new Ichigo was far stronger. Kuraku watched many of his comrades fall to Ichigo's blade. But it wasn't just Ichigo's Bankai that caused the court guard so much trouble. It was all those new Quincy techniques he'd learned. We couldn't even lay a finger on him. The multiplier of his Bankai on top of a Quincy Volt standing was just too much, Kuraku thought to himself. And that ability he had was like nothing he had ever seen before. An impenetrable shield. The court guard had lost before the battle even begun, because they couldn't harm Ichigo. This new ability completely overwhelmed them. The only saving grace in the back of Kuraku's mind was he knew that Rio was safe. For Yhwach and the Sternritter have no way to access the royal palace. They do not have Rio's bones, so they will not be breaking a hole through the barrier. So for now, the three worlds are safe, if you want to call it that. Soon, everything as we know it will end. All hollows will be eradicated. Most humans will be eradicated as well, a few kept around just as slaves. Yhwach will rule all three worlds, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it. For if the royal division decides to come down and challenge Yhwach, Ichigo, and the entire Sternritter army, then they'll only be breaking a hole in the barrier themselves, thus giving Yhwach entrance to the royal palace. If it wasn't for the loss of Ichigo, Kuraku thought to himself, maybe we would have stood a chance in defeating the Sternritter. But any future looks bleak. Kuraku knows that Kisuke Uehara is somewhere out there alive, but he doesn't know where. He also thinks back to the strange message he received right before escaping into the shadows. It was from Ichigo's friend, Uryu Ishida, and it read, "Captain Kuraku, I am going to try to destroy the Sternritter from within, but it's going to take time. If there's anything you can do on your end to help me, it would be greatly appreciated. The sake of all three worlds depend on us now. We can't let them down." And that ends our what if, guys, for at least now. That was what if Ichigo had been reprogrammed and joined the Sternritter army. And pretty much, it would just be complete devastation of the Soul Society. They have no help without Ichigo coming in and saving the day. Now, there's a lot of different caveats that take place in this what if to make it happen, but that's all the part of what ifs and what makes them so fun. I could do this all day. I love talking about Bleach. I love talking about Ichigo. And I love talking about hypothetical situations. Guys, if you liked this video and want to see the continuation of this what if, then tell me below in the comments. Also tell me, guys, what are your Shrift ideas for Ichigo? Because like I said, I really want to know. This video was a lot of fun, and I think it would be a lot of fun to read the comments, seeing what you guys think. Do you think Sternritter Ichigo would be stronger than true Bankai Horn of Salvation Ichigo? It's hard telling. It just kind of depends on what kind of Shrift Ichigo gets. But all those Quincy abilities with a Volstanding and his full-brain Bankai make Ichigo Sternritter version a complete monster. Something that Soul Society has no means of dealing with. Anyways, guys, until the next one, this is Sterling signing out. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for future videos like this. Have a good one, guys.